Welcome to Momentum and Matters, the podcast that delves into the latest and greatest matters, trends, and innovations shaping culture. I'm Lisa Gramling, SVP of Research, Innovations, and Intelligence at Momentum. Today, we're exploring trend predictions. In this episode, we will discuss what are the next big trends you need to pay close attention to. I'm joined by Dr. Antonia Ward from Stylus. Welcome, Antonia. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your role is at Stylus?
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. I'm the Chief Futurist at Stylus, which is an amazing job title, an amazing job. We're a trend intelligence business. We're for future-looking brands and agencies, and my role covers a couple of areas. I work across our business with all of our internal teams, making sure everything we do is future-facing. But most of my time is with my team, the advisory team, which works with brands around the world on bespoke strategic trend research. So I work across a super broad range of consumer insight, product and marketing futures projects every year, from digital health to TV futures to cultural change across generations to food trends and beauty trends. And I love it.
That's amazing. Wow, you don't sound like you have anything on your plate.
It's a big plate, but who doesn't love a big plate?
Exactly. So before we really dive in, I wanted to ask you what you and your colleagues at Stylist are betting on this year, regarding the biggest trends we should expect to see.
Well, I'm sorry to say there's never one big trend. It's always about working across all of the trends we see and seeing what's happening as they work together or don't. So where I think the biggest trend is in our own unlearning, us letting go of what I read this week described as our ABCs, our assumptions, our biases, and our certainty. Because the one thing we can predict is there's going to be a whole bunch of change this year. And the shortcuts that help us make sense of the world, we have to keep reevaluating those. We're seeing so much desire for elevating connection. We're seeing changes in AI. We're seeing changes in consumption. We're seeing different expectations of brands and institutions. But none of those things are static. They're always changing. So detaching ourselves from those assumptions, I think, is going to be the biggest trend. We have to be thinking about unlearning what we assume is true and keeping that kind of deep curiosity about the way the world is changing.
Right. ABC. We're 5 minutes into the podcast and I've already learned something new. I'm going to be using that this year. Thank you for that. Okay. So we've given you a sneak peek of our 2025 little book of trends. We do that every year. And you may have noticed we went a little light on the AI trends this year. And that was purposeful because we first started to see a pattern emerging in our 2024 Global We Know Experiences research that we did last year. And we saw that consumers were pushing back slightly on tech and AI and wanting more of that human connection, which you've just mentioned. And of course, we know tech and AI are going to continue to grow. That's just the way of the world. And we've seen that acceleration since the pandemic. But I wanted to get your thoughts on what you're seeing with connection and community. You've mentioned that, but if we could talk a little bit more, because a human-first approach, it's such a wonderful insight to uncover. It just made me so happy to see that this movement is happening. And, instead of going so far into technology, that the humans are fighting back. So can you tell me a little bit about what, if you could support that a little bit more?
We are absolutely also seeing trends around connection and community. We've talked about a social recession, that we have fewer friends. We spend less time with our friends. Parents are anxious that their kids don't have friends. This real push towards wanting community, wanting affirming and meaningful social interactions is absolutely there. I completely agree. It's why we see changes in the spaces that we inhabit, the third spaces in busy urban areas where we want more of a focus on kind of communing and well-being. It's why we see an understanding that spending time with people is good for our mental health. And that's why we want to do more of it. It's why we're seeing changes in how consumers interact with brands, a new level of expectation that brands will enable people to spend more meaningful time together. But I would counsel against thinking that this is wholly anti-AI or anti-technology. I think one of the things, I talked about unlearning, is unlearning our instinct to create opposites and oppositions. I think we have to be thinking about where can AI and technology enable the creativity or the services or the interactions that are the antithesis to social disconnection. The most exciting AI opportunities might be in enabling connection. We've been tracking things like the role of squad shopping changing or it re-emerging, in-world group video chats on things like Apple Vision Pro. I think there's an intersection of technology and this push for connection that we would do well to keep an eye on.
Amazing. It's happily cohabitating, I guess you could say.
Totally.
Well, we're going to talk about AI, and we definitely are going to talk about that in a little bit. But that was thank you. So I wanted to talk about one of my favorite trends for this year, and that's the dreamscaping economy that we've written about. The research has been endless about how much we need sleep. We're actually sleeping 25 minutes more than we were like 10 years ago. But I mean, a sleep concert. Where do I sign up? Where do I sign up for the sleep concert? Because sounds amazing, and I would totally do it in a heartbeat. And I think I know a lot of other people who would as well. So, what are your thoughts about the dreamscaping economy? Are you on board, Antonia?
I am so on board. I am someone for whom like my first words out of my mouth most days are 5 more minutes. Like that slightly pathetic under the under the covers.
I know.
5 more minutes,
Me too.
please. Um, we've been tracking trends in sleep over the past 5 years. I had a quick look on the Stylus platform, and we really peaked our talk about sleep in 2020, which is about right. It's coming into the fore in the sleep economy of major consumers and brands right now. I can totally understand this for so many reasons. Of course, it comes from our push for health and well-being, for mental health. Of course, it comes because we have to be more resilient as life throws more and more things at us. But also, sleep's the only thing we do that we can't experience while it's happening. So, of course, we want to control and improve it. Of course, we do. And some of the work we've done is like, it's not just one monolithic thing. Of course, we want more sleep, but we also want better sleep. We want to fall asleep quicker. We want to have better quality sleep at night. We want to manage whatever's happening to you at night, whether that's night sweats or heart palpitations, or, we want to wake up more easily and more refreshed and in a better mood. So I think we'll definitely get into trying to control our dreams. Products for lucid dreaming and our behaviors for lucid dreaming definitely becoming more mainstream. And I think we'll also work a little bit harder to acknowledge that, yeah, there's a huge amount of product and engagement opportunity for brands in connecting to people's desire for sleep and for better sleep. And I'm all for that. But to acknowledge there's aspiration and power and privilege in that too. If you've got a body, the wellness industrial complex is going to make you feel bad about it one way or another. If you're working 3 jobs or you're hungry or you're cold or too hot, you're dealing with noise pollution, you're going to be desperate for quality sleep in a different way that might not be solved by magnesium supplements and mouth tapes. But overall, totally behind your trend, not least because I got my partner mouth tapes as a stocking stuffer 2 years ago, and he couldn't understand what the hell it was that I was giving him. I was like, believe me, this is going to be totally all over the place in a year.
Right? You're like, I'm a trendsetter, and I'm way ahead of the trend. I need to get those for my husband, quite honestly. But sleep can be an experience. And we really did spend a lot of time just seeing how many amazing things, obviously the melatonin has been around for a while, but it's really elevated. So I'm excited to see how this trend progresses this year.
Yeah, and there's something really interesting about sleep because it has to be habitual, but we're all looking for those quicker and faster interventions. So there's a longer arc and a more immediate kind of quicker fix that we're looking for. And of course, there's huge opportunity for brands in kind of balancing across both of those.
Well, we'll meet here again next year and we'll talk about how much it's grown.
For sure.
Okay, so let's move on to the book in general. We focus on 10 areas that we find that are interesting and important. Our team sits down, starts about in June, July, and we really start to hash out what we're seeing kind of emerging already that hasn't yet become a trend. But it's hard. It's hard to narrow down to 10. But I want to know, are there any surprising or unconventional trends that marketers should pay close attention to? Could be in our book, could be something that that didn't make the cut.
Sure. I mean, I loved your book. I love the ideas that were across so many different things, from technology to consumer habits and behavior. I've got a couple of things. I think there's one bigger idea around media fragmentation that's going to make it simultaneously harder and easier to reach consumers. On the one hand, you've got such growth in retail media, you've got changes in what's happening in store, you've got e-commerce advertising, you've got retailers and even quick service restaurant brands creating their own media channels. So there's opportunity there, and that means formats and channels will change. On the other hand, you've got consumers turning to group chats rather than more broadcast social media. So it's harder for brands to show up in those spaces, and much harder for them to find out what's going on in those spaces too. So I think there's something there about when we talk about channels, what are we talking about? How are they broadening but also fragmenting, becoming more niche but also becoming more powerful?
Amazing. Thank you.
And the second idea is toys and play.
Ah, easy.
In 2024, adults bought more toys for themselves than for the 2 to 5-year-old segment for the first time. I love this, and I really like the idea of play, retiring the phrase kidult and making kid-like behavior become part of being an adult, being playful, being imaginative, being silly, being full of awe and wonder. Make that part of being an adult and being a grown-up, make it a feature, not a bug, because I think it's how we learn, it's how we connect, it's how we relax. Maybe the opposite of stress isn't relaxation and sleep,
Oh,
maybe it's play.
yes, please. I mean, I know, obviously puzzles became very big. The coloring books were more for calming, but actually, our Friday fives that we put out every Friday, I've had a few of those fun little trends or pieces of or insights in there that talk about a bit about play and how it's not just for children anymore. So I'm fully on board with that, and I'm going to keep an eye. I'm going to keep an eye on that this year. I'm going to do more play this year. How about that? Okay, I guess we should talk about AI. How can we not, right? And I know I've kind of mentioned it earlier, and we went a little light on AI with this year's book. For some reason, simply because our research was showing, I mentioned earlier, that that the humans are fighting back just a little bit. And again, I think we talked about it. It's not going to go away, but we did feature one trend, and we're calling it education with an AI in the middle. That there are opportunities for AI to play a smart role in our lives. So, obviously entering into education and helping our teachers, who are probably some of the hardest working people in the world. So, what are your thoughts about AI entering the education space?
Oh, love this trend. Thought this was really, really interesting. I'm a bit of a geek about kind of learning theories. I always used to say that we'd never reach artificial general intelligence because we don't understand human intelligence enough yet. Um, I think there are so many new and exciting things happening in the fields that inform education, educational psychology, cognitive psychology, learning about how learning happens, understanding the balance between working memory and long term memory, questioning whether learning has to be hard to be effective. And I think there are a lot of ways that AI can become embedded in these areas of research and also extend beyond them. But I think we have to ask in conversations, like in all conversations about AI, in conversations about education and AI, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Is it access to education? Is it personalization? Is it increased expertise? Is it the process of checking whether learning has been done or testing as we know it? Or is it the administrative side that stops teachers doing their best work in the classroom because they're so overloaded with the other ideas, not spending enough time doing active teaching? Or are we talking about digital poverty and bias and lack of resources and even lack of psychological safety in an education environment? And I think there are so many exciting areas we could use AI for. And our real ambition probably would be real-time adaptive learning at scale. Imagine if you got adaptive and dynamic feedback combined with explicit instruction, a system that adjusts based on your performance and the complexity of the material and the task and difficulty, and giving you that kind of corrective feedback and optimum challenge, I think is super exciting. But there are still some challenges. How can we find insights that are generalizable across the different types of learning that children and indeed adults need? Language learning is different from math, is different from science, is different from learning social interaction. And to go back to your earlier point, the other thing we have to understand is people want to learn from people. That's why we're here talking to each other now, right? We could have just given our ideas to an avatar and had them kind of talk to each other, but we wanted to interact. And I think that's going to be crucial in anything we do that enables AI to improve education for everyone.
Amazing. That makes me feel really good that we selected that one. As a researcher at Momentum, our clients are always coming to us asking us a lot about, what's the next big thing? What's the next big thing in experiential commerce? What's the next big thing in just shopper in general, or just the attitudes and behaviors that we can start to weave into some of our future experiences? So I'm wondering, how can marketers stay ahead of that game, of the trend game, without having to chase it, like chasing the next big thing and kind of being right there in the moment?
Such a great question. I think this is a balance. It's all a balance about understanding the next big slow thing, keeping track of those slower moving changes that affect and influence how people behave, and balancing that with keeping on top of those faster changes in behavior. So also being really ruthless and, radically honest about what's the next big thing and what's just the next new thing, because we as humans, we like new things, and we should continue to enable those and explore them and play with them. But we have to build in flexibility into our systems and our services and our processes and our relationships with our suppliers, in order to respond to the next new thing at the same time as we're working on the next big thing.
Yeah, you mentioned the next new thing. And obviously, a lot of the time, it's technology. It's technology 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. I think of, AI, and I think of AR and VR. It's actually AR and VR has been around for a long time, and it's just continues to evolve. So, thinking about AI, obviously we're focusing on education, but AR and VR, how do you think they are going to be shaping our future marketing campaigns as we look to this year?
Oh, so interesting. I do think for AR and VR, we do have a little bit of a hardware lag. Some of the devices and the technologies that enable the experiences are not quite where we want them to be. And that's okay because this stuff takes time. We've always been ambitious and frantic for the new thing. Where's my flying car? Where are my new technologies that will enable me to have an easier life and to sleep more? So I think that those kind of AI-powered overlays, the VR devices, aren't quite yet at the place that we would like them to be as consumers, but I think they're getting there. What I think's interesting is how AI can enable us to create what we didn't expect. This is the next kind of big challenge for AI, right? Generative AI, yes, it can create things faster. Yes, it can give you more variations and more options at the point in a creative process when you're thinking divergently. But because so much generative AI is trained to predict based on mass, based on average, based on the center, and because the human creativity that creates surprising, exciting, meaningful is often at the edges, we have to embed humanity and human creativity along with the AI tools. Having said that, if we're using AI or indeed other technologies to understand more about the consumers we're targeting and to understand how to offer personalization at scale, that's only going to increase engagement and connection. You know how personally affronted you feel when you're retargeted with something you've already bought. And you're like, you don't even know me. I've invested, I've purchased, and how dare you demonstrate that you don't know me as well as I would like you to? So the expectation is already there. The marketing and the systems just have to catch up.
Right. So I guess when it says like AI friend or foe, you're thinking it's a friend, right? I mean, I think we have to.
I think every friend can disappoint you at times.
Oh,
You've got
what a
you've got to keep
quote.
your friends honest, right?
Exactly. I laughed. I was laughing a little bit because when you said the flying car, Back to the Future back in the 80s, I assumed I would be flying in a car by now. It is amazing how some things don't always shape up to be a prediction. But
For
that
sure,
was
for
not real
sure.
life. I want to give you almost the last word. Obviously, I'm going to close us out in a little bit. But, you know, I'm often asked, well, what's the actionable tip? What's the, when we're thinking, when I'm reading through this book, what should I really be focusing on? Because we have a brand or a client that's looking at it cohesively, all 10. For me, how that actionable tip, I think for me, I want brands and I want marketers to not be afraid to reinvent. I do think that the overall theme of the 10 trends for this year was reinvention. If you really kind of collapse it all, like reinventing events, reinventing their messaging and their experiences to build that deeper connection with consumers. And I believe like we should be fostering a sense of community, which I know we've talked about earlier, and really doubling on what truly matters, which is the people at the end of the day. People want to be more present. In our research last year for our We Know experiences really talked about that. And if they're more present, they're going to be more focused. And it's a win-win for brands. So I ask you, if you had to leave marketers with one actionable tip to prepare for these trends for the future, what would it be?
Obviously, I have more than one because love an actionable tip.
And
I think
I'm happy to hear them.
I think first of all, and I would say this, wouldn't I? I really counsel everyone to think about trends and the future, not just in the new year, but all year. Invest in your expert sources of future insights. Invest in the expertise of your suppliers and partners, because we all know you're too busy doing what you do to be decoding the future all the time. And there are people who do this for a living. But my actionable tip is kind of in four parts, and it's think deeply, plan excessively, act boldly, and leave room to play. So thinking is work. How many times last year did you say you didn't have time to think? So forcing yourselves to make time to think about things, think about the trends in your book, think about exploring more ideas and more possibilities before that taking action for reinvention. And then you've got to make the plan, organize the ideas, the focus on the objectives, know what to do now and know what to do next, and then you can act fast. Now, the tricky thing is those two modes of creativity are kind of naturally oppositional. So all the creatives listening were with me when I was on thinking deeply and reinventing. And then I started talking about organizing and objectives, and everyone like slumped like a sad puppy. You have to work at creating the space for enabling excellence out of the insights that you have available to you. And then you should play, because as we said earlier, play is essential to humans. We've got to do more of it. We might learn things, we might invent new things, and we might even sleep better.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Momentum and Matters. I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Antonia Ward from Stylus. Thank you so much for your inspiration and your insights. I cannot wait to see what happens this year. We hope you enjoyed our discussion around the latest trends shaping the industry. Be sure to check out Momentum's Little Book of Trends for more insights.
Momentum matters, the future unveiled. Momentum